Subscriptions and the product-as-a-service model are frequently treated as the undisputed endgame for modern business. We look at Apple's service revenue or Alphabet's cloud infrastructure and assume the continuous billing model is universally superior. Even in heavy industry, consultants point to Kaiser Kompressoren. They famously stopped selling air compressors and started selling air as a service, charging factories by the cubic meter. But this textbook success story hides a strict physical reality. The servitization trend is not universally applicable to all hardware. The breakdown of this model happens directly on the factory floor, specifically within factory automation and core processing machinery. Applying tech sector subscription models to heavy manufacturing blindly is a misunderstanding of physical and economic constraints. To understand this boundary, we have to split the umbrella term recurring revenue into two separate concepts. The first is financialization. This is a shift in a corporation's profit structure to rely heavily on portfolio income, interest, and capital gains. That is a macroeconomic shift. We are setting it aside to focus entirely on operational strategy. The second concept is servitization. This is a continuous contract where a company provides a function and ties its revenue directly to usage volume or time. Our objective is to define the exact physical conditions that dictate where this usage-based model succeeds and where it collapses in a production environment. The physical nature of a product dictates its business model. You cannot force a product into a service by simply changing the billing structure. To map this boundary, we need to reverse engineer Kaiser's compressed air model to see exactly why it functions. This logic tree outlines three servitization rules. First, quantifiability. Compressed air is measured in precise cubic meters. Second, value alignment. The volume consumed corresponds to the value extracted. Third, non-core competency. Air is a utility. It doesn't define the factory's competitive edge. Because it is an interchangeable utility, outsourcing the air supply carries zero strategic risk. The factory loses no proprietary advantage. A usage-based recurring model requires all three of these conditions to work simultaneously. Kaiser succeeds because they sell a utility that is physically and economically isolated from the client's manufacturing process. Apply those same three rules to a core processing machine, like a CNC mill used by an automotive part supplier. Look at Rule 1. You can quantify a CNC mill's electrical power input, but the customer isn't buying power. This breaks Rule 2, value alignment. The exact same electricity can produce a perfectly machined component or a defective scrap part. Billing by machine usage disconnects from the actual value received. Finally, Rule 3 collapses. For a parts supplier, precise machining is their primary competitive advantage. To outsource that core processing function is to surrender their reason for existing as a business. Core processing machines fail the utility test. A direct transition to a usage-based service is logically impossible. If a standard subscription fails, an equipment manufacturer has only two extreme operational models left to force a recurring revenue stream. The first option is a shared machining center. The equipment maker owns a centralized hub of machines, and customers rent time on them. This hits physical barriers immediately. You have to ship heavy physical goods back and forth. Worse, customers would have to upload guarded intellectual property and design specs into a shared facility. The risk of leaks makes this unviable. The second option is in-house contract manufacturing. The equipment maker effectively takes over and runs the factory floor inside the customer's own facility. This transfers an enormous amount of risk. The equipment maker is suddenly responsible for material yield, scrap rates, and delivery headlines. It turns a scalable, high-margin equipment business into a localized, low-margin, labor-intensive service. Forcing servitization onto a core process requires the equipment maker to become a manufacturer, destroying the profitability of their original business model. Executives often claim the barrier to these models is technical, that they lack the IT systems to handle continuous billing. This diagram illustrates how modern software solves the technical problem. Systems like SAP handle continuous subscription logic perfectly. But the true bottleneck lies beneath the software layer. Mitsubishi Electric's factory automation division provides a clear archetype of this broken physical architecture. The first structural barrier is the distributor model. Selling through third-party supply channels severs the equipment maker's access to the final customer's usage data. The second barrier is variant configuration. Nearly every heavy machine is uniquely customized for a specific factory. Because these are one-off builds, it is practically impossible to write standardized subscription contracts. The third barrier is internal. Heavy manufacturing relies on separate corporate silos, making it difficult for engineering, sales, and accounting divisions to align on a single service strategy. The failure to scale PaaS and factory automation represents a direct collision between digital theory and the reality of bespoke hardware and fragmented supply chains. Establishing a recurring revenue stream in B2B hardware requires strict geographical boundaries. Look at this factory blueprint. We can map exactly where a service model belongs. Stop looking at the center of the production line and focus on the periphery. This is where you find the chillers, the hydraulic power units, and the standard conveyors. These machines fit the compressed air formula. Their outputs, temperature control, pressure, and movement, are quantifiable, aligned with value, and operate entirely as non-core utilities. Meanwhile, the core processing machines and main controllers at the center of the blueprint must remain capital expenditures, because they dictate the factory's unique competitive advantage. Successful hardware servitization requires a surgical approach, extracting utility functions while leaving core competencies under the customer's direct control. The recurring revenue model is powerful, but it is strictly bound by the utility constraint. If a product cannot be mathematically and strategically decoupled from the customer's core capability, it cannot function as a service. Forcing a subscription mandate from the top down to satisfy a trend will not modernize a heavy industry business. Forcing PaaS where it doesn't fit degrades product value, introduces operational risk, and forces customers to choose between modern billing and their own strategic autonomy. A real growth strategy respects the physical nature of the machinery over the appeal of software trends. True strategic growth in manufacturing comes from knowing the exact boundary line between an interchangeable utility and a core advantage.